is now resumed. Prior to the suspension of evening last, the order of this House was in relation to order number 1. We shall now revert to order number 1. The honourable member for St. Philip West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to acknowledge two of the most important persons in my life. These persons, who by their unshakable support and love have given the greatest gift to me any parent can give to a child. That gift is confidence. Confidence that suggests that one can be who or whatever one desires to be. Confidence that suggests that there is no obstacle too great to overcome. Confidence to know that in everything there is purpose, determined and guided by the supreme being known as God. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to say thank you to my parents, Harvey and Monica King, for allowing me to pursue my dreams and become the man who stands before you in these hallowed chambers. I want to take a few minutes to thank the fantastic people of St. Philip West for placing their confidence in me to be their duly elected representative. I also wish to thank the many people across this country who continue to lift me up through their prayers, praying that I am successful as a minister, praying that this government would be successful in bringing Barbados out of 10 years of darkness into a bright new dawn where pride and industry can once again become hallmarks of the character of this nation. It is the irony of all ironies, Mr. Speaker, that in an earlier part of my life, exactly 35 years ago, I would have asked Barbadians to tighten their belts. I would have been mimicking the then Prime Minister, the Honourable Tom Adams. Mr. Speaker, I am called again to ask Barbadians to tighten their belts. Not this time singing though, colleagues. But the irony is that the conditions under which I ask them are familiar to this party whenever it assumes office after the Democratic Labour Party. From the onset, let me state that I fully support the budgetary proposals as outlined by our Prime Minister, the Honourable Mia Mottley. There is no doubt in my mind that these measures are needed at this time to rescue, restore, and rebuild this wonderful island we all love and cherish called Barbados. Madam Prime Minister, you have achieved in 3 weeks what a previous administration failed to do in 10 years. Not only have you hit the road running, taking decisive steps to engage with the IMF and the social partners, but you have renewed confidence in the people of Barbados that there is still some good, some truth, some nobility left in the realm of politics. For that, I commend you on behalf of the people of Barbados. However, with everything that you've done in 3 short weeks, and understanding the challenges that face us as a people, it is expected, though somewhat sad, that fear, rather than analytical thought, appears to be the catalyst behind much of the criticism leveled at this mini-budget. I will attempt to address this fear by redefining the meaning of the word fear, so that we may begin to realize why certain elements within the society continue to use this tactic of fear-mongering to score political points. Fear, F-E-A-R, can be described as false evidence appearing real. I'm going to repeat this. F-E-A-R can be described as false evidence appearing real. This certainly manifests itself when persons suggest that this budget gives on one hand and takes on the other. A close, unbiased examination of the facts will put that assumption to rest. Every single measure, and I'm going to say this, every single measure put forward in this budget is nothing more than a mechanism designed to facilitate the protection and well-being of the most vulnerable members of our society. So that if we are supposed to be counted as true, loyal sons and daughters, there can be no room for selfishness in any form, shape, or fashion. Mr. Speaker, if school fees are to be removed from our children, then the money must come from somewhere. If non-contributory pensions must increase, then the money must come from somewhere. If roads are to be repaired, then the money must come from somewhere. If trust loans are to be issued to small business persons, then the money must come from somewhere. And last but not least, the Honourable Minister, Mr. Bostic, can bear me out on this. If proper health care must be delivered to the people of this country, then the money must come from somewhere. It therefore cannot be unreasonable to ask all patrons to share the burden equitably. The honourable members of this Parliament continue to play their part and lead the way by giving up 10% of their salaries to various charities in an effort to enable them to carry out the good work they do on behalf of the least fortunate among us. Mr. Speaker, there is no government anywhere on this planet that can wave a magic wand and say, abracadabra, money come down. It will not happen. Extraordinary times call for extraordinary actions. We only have one chance to get this right, whereas a previous administration had 20+ downgrades and 10 years to put this country in the sewer. I therefore take comfort in knowing that all right-thinking Barbadians fully appreciate that the people have spoken, that the election is over, and that it is time for us to unite around our flag, our motto, our pledge, in an effort to rescue, restore, and rebuild this gem of an island we call home. Mr. Speaker, there are 3 proposals that on the surface may seem unattractive or insignificant to prompt much debate. But these are points I would not want this chamber or those tuned in to overlook. 1, the proposal to upgrade our fleet at the Transport Board by purchasing clean energy buses using solar or natural gas engines. Now, these buses will, of course, bolster our capacity to move commuters across the island while reducing the amount of carbon emitted into our atmosphere. We will be well on our way to establishing a fully green Barbados free of pollution of the use of fossil fuels, at least by 2025. I am sure that the Honourable Minister for Tourism will be elated to promote Barbados as a clean energy space, while we reduce our foreign exchange output for the buying of these commodities such as gasoline and diesel. Now, these buses will save us hundreds of thousands of dollars, I'm told, in repairs and maintenance because these engines have less moving parts than the diesel or gasoline models. And in the present conditions, and hearing what we've heard, what has been happening at the Transport Board, I think one would agree that this is a good thing. Number two, the placement of safety officers, guidance counselors, and social workers in 7 secondary schools. Having some knowledge, Mr. Speaker, of dealing with troubled youth, I am of the opinion that this action will not only immediately create new jobs, but it will very much improve and stabilize the conditions within schools for learning. I am hoping that in the second phase of our expansion, that this initiative will be taken into the communities across Barbados, where we who have worked in the justice system for a long time know where the problems lie. The third thing that I would want to address is the departure tax. Now, it is my opinion that for far too long, we have been afraid to place a reasonable value on the things that we enjoy and oftentimes take for granted. Our beaches, our sun, our sea, our culture, these are invaluable assets. Our products and services have been undervalued due to our own insistence that no one will be willing to pay for them. As producers of what has been touted the best sugar, and also being the pioneers of rum, Mr. Speaker, I suggest that we have failed miserably for years to turn these boasts into lucrative economic transactions. What we have is what a person coming to this island desires. Therefore, its full monetary worth as a scarce or, in some quarters, a high-end commodity must be realized. The reality is this: one does not pay cheaply for a Ferrari, and so therefore, we cannot continue to literally give away that which is ours without placing a value on it. And I'm saying, therefore, that if we are to maintain our beaches, our hotels, and our attractions and the infrastructure, long after travelers to this country have left these shores, then they too must contribute to the upkeep of all that they exploit and enjoy while on this island. Mr. Speaker, I mentioned earlier that in another part of my life, I would have sung about budgets. I want to mention also that in that other life, I still hold the record with that same song as being the longest calypso ever sung in the history of calypso. It is with that in mind that I'm going to bring this speech to a close. But I want you, Mr. Speaker, and all the members of this honorable chair, to accept and realize that we, as a people, have shown resilience to bounce back whenever devastated by natural disaster or by natural incompetence. This budget is a part of a first stage of us on our way to recovery. This ride, it will be bumpy. There will be times when some may feel like giving up. But I implore every single one of you, if you do nothing else, please be your brother's keeper on this journey. There can be no losers as long as we, and when I say we, I'm not only referring to the persons in this chamber. I am speaking to every single member of the society we call Barbados. There can be no losers when we work together. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
The Honourable Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To God be the glory, great things he hath done. I stand here this morning to make my contribution to the budgetary proposals as delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister and the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast. And I do so really eternally grateful to the mercies and the blessings in abundance of Almighty God during the past 5 years of service to the people of Barbados and to the people of the city of Bridgetown. I also do so really grateful and owing a debt of gratitude to the people of the city of Bridgetown for recognizing the fact that one good term deserves another. And I will pay my dividends to the people of the city of Bridgetown based on the level of representation in this honorable chamber and the level of service that I will deliver to the constituents of Bridgetown during the next 5 years. I'm also thankful to the Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, for giving me my first opportunity to serve in a cabinet of this country, and even for giving me the challenge of being the minister with responsibility for health and wellness. It's a responsibility that I'm told is indeed demanding and challenging, but I'm saying to the people of Barbados, have no fear. I've spent over 20 years of my life preparing for a challenge such as this. And for those who may be wondering why a military man would be given the task of being a minister with such a mighty responsibility, let me say to all Barbadians that there's a lot more to the military than bullets and guns. And as my leader said on several occasions, if you don't believe me, watch me and see what I will do. I also want to thank the Permanent Secretary and the management staff at the Ministry of Health and Wellness for their warm welcome, for really spending a lot of time with me in detailed briefings, and giving me a crash course which has brought me up to scratch today to be able to stand here and deliver with a degree of confidence on this budget in relation to the ministry that I have the honor to lead. This budget is a budget for the people. It is indeed the people's budget. And I say so without any doubt whatsoever. Yes, there's a measure of sweetness in the budget, if one wants to say that, and there's a measure of bitterness. But forgive me if I use a medical analogy, being the new minister. If you have a patient that was politically, economically, and socially comatose for the last 5 to 7 years, that patient being Barbados, and you want to take that patient to recovery and to a level of prosperity that the patient once enjoyed, then some sort of medication is required to do that. And we all know that medication does not always have a pleasant taste, but it has a very good result at the end of it. And that is what is going to happen to this country called Barbados, this patient called Barbados. I am very happy that we have begun to honor the pledges that we've made in our manifesto, our promises to the people of this country. And that is very, very important to me. And it should be important to all of us in here. Why I say that? I say that because for the last 5, 7, 8 years, the people of this country reached a position where they are indicated in several ways that they had lost confidence in governance in this country, and they had lost confidence in the government. And by extension, they'd also lost confidence in each and every politician in this country. By doing what we said to the people that we are going to do, I am satisfied that we would restore that level of confidence, which is necessary not only for ourselves, but the kind of legacy as parliamentarians and as politicians that we are going to leave for those who follow us. And that, ladies, that, Mr. Speaker, is extremely important. This budget makes it possible for me this morning to be happy for our senior citizens who will get an increase in both non-contributory and contributory pensions. And if you represent an urban constituency like mine, and indeed I believe it is the same throughout this country, you would know that this is a significant thing that we have done, because our elderly people have been suffering for the last few years under the last administration because they have not been able to make ends meet on a daily basis. And this is going to give them a measure of relief. I'm happy also because our public servants will finally get a raise that they deserve. And although some may say that having received the raise that we're going to be taking something out of it, the point is that we have brought them to a level now where when hard times come and they've started, that they'll be in a much better position to be able to cope with the difficulties that lie ahead. This is a situation that did not exist for the past 5 years. I am happy indeed because 5,000 households with pit toilets will start to see a change in this country, where pit toilets will be replaced by waterborne facilities, and where young Barbadians living in the communities will be able to benefit from this exercise and from this initiative. I'm happy for the several micro enterprises that will be established and those that will be enhanced, those that already exist, because of the initiation of the trust funds loans, which I'm sure a lot of Barbadians are waiting for. I'm happy indeed for the commencement of the process to salvage or repair our country's reputation by giving urgent and immediate attention to our sewage systems on the South Coast and in Bridgetown, and also for the crumbling infrastructure which had been getting worse over the last several years, that we made a commitment to start to fix. And in this budget, we have begun to start to honor that commitment. So that this budget, Mr. Speaker, is indeed a budget for the people. And even though some measures had to be taken, which we really did not want to take, but which we felt that we had to take, these measures are being taken for the people as well, because at the end of this exercise, prosperity will return to the people. The mini-budget presented by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and investments contemplates the execution of several health system-wide initiatives in this country that will improve the delivery of health services to the people of Barbados. These include 3 fiscal measures in particular. The first one being the contribution of $45 million to the QEH through the introduction of a health services contribution, or HSC, of 2.5%. And let me remind the Honourable Chamber that the 2.5% is split between employers who will contribute 1.5% and employee who will contribute 1%. The second measure is the capital injection of about $11 million towards the upgrade of the Accident and Emergency Department. And this is an area that had been creating a lot of issues and problems for the public of Barbados. And the third one, the extension of opening hours to 2 polyclinics at Randall, Phillips, and Winston Scott to a 24-hour basis. And these 3 things I would like to speak to for the remainder of time that I have on the floor. Fiscal measure number 1, the $40 million contribution. We know that over the last 10 years or so, funding for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital has been appropriated at about $150 million per year, with supplementary provisions made in every fiscal year of those 10 years. And in spite of this, the QEH still remained cash-strapped because, 1, in a lot of months, they never got what was budgeted for, and also even statements that were made in this Honourable Chamber and commitments and promises never materialized. So the hospital has always been playing catch-up, to use a Bayesian term, playing catch-up. And then the appropriated funds go into the consolidated fund, where there's competition to fix infrastructure, roads, education. They're competing interests. And the government of the day then, based on the government's priorities, determine where money goes, who gets. And oftentimes, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was left out in the cold. And this uncertainty and unpredictability created a number of issues for the board of the QEH in terms of satisfying the demands of the public, in terms of providing the services at the level that they wanted to provide these services to the people of Barbados. You had issues with maintenance, and no proper maintenance program could be put in place, not knowing when and if you were going to get the money to pay for that program. And these challenges really created the nightmare that we have witnessed at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And while the demand for and cost for services continue to outstrip the supply of available resources, the woes of the average Barbadian who had to go into the Queen Elizabeth Hospital for any kind of service, those woes reached the point where people just became very, very fed up. And we are still at that point, unfortunately. Then we had the epidemic of non-communicable diseases related to diabetes and hypertension. Now, this is driving the hospital costs up. And if you look at the latest figures released by the Chronic Disease Research Center, CDRC, there are more than 15 heart attacks and more than 55 strokes occurring in this country on a monthly basis. And the costs related to taking care of these patients, especially the in-hospital costs, the emergency costs, these costs are pushing the budget of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital up to a point where it has become unsustainable. And in addition to the NCDs, we have the situation of changing demographics, population demography. Then in this country, we have one of the highest proportions of centenarians anywhere in the world. And we have an aging population, 14%, of which is over 65 years as I speak. And by 2025, that figure is likely to go to about 18%. And this also have some impacts in terms of the provision of health care for the elderly. The increasing cost of drugs and medical supplies, which are outside of the control of the QAH, they consume more than 17% of the recurring budget of the hospital. And these are things that cannot really be controlled. And then we have, over the past 10 years, these things that have driven the costs, and then the provision of more and more services at the hospital, and the budget remaining at 150 million, or the promise, the voted budget, it really is unsustainable. And so, the injection of $40 million through contributions is going to be very, very transformational for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in order to be able now to plan programs of maintenance, the delivery of services, and to take care of a number of the issues that exist within the hospital. Fiscal measure number 2, upgrade of the accident and emergency department. The A&E department is one of the first points of contact for many patients who come to the hospital in search of urgent care and treatment. Annually, A&E sees about 40,000 patients. Patients who are triaged when they come in initially, that is sorted out by the nurses, and then they go to the various areas depending on their condition. And that whole triaging situation, that is critical in terms of the length of time that people have to stay at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And these are things that Barbadians need to understand. But the A&E has some significant challenges, and that's a fact. One is the availability of beds at the QAH, on the wards of the QAH. The availability of beds. Accident and emergency has about 25 beds that are utilized for urgent care, or supposed to be utilized for urgent care. They therefore require 25 beds to be available on a daily basis at the wards of in the wards of the QAH. And this is often not the case. And this bed situation has a rippling effect within accident and emergency, in the sense that several people end up in beds in A&E who ought to be on the wards but cannot be moved. And that also retards the progress or process of persons who are coming in now to be triaged. It also has a negative impact on the delivery of emergency ambulance services in this country. Why? Because several of the trolleys that bring in patients belonging to the ambulance service, the patients end up spending inordinately long lengths of time on the trolleys because there are no beds in A&E, because there are no beds on the wards of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And that is an issue that has to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. And we are going to come up with some ways and means to deal with that within the hospital system. There are also some internal issues within A&E that must be resolved, which I'm not going to mention here today, but which have been drawn to my attention by the authorities. And I will work with them to be able to have those resolved, because we must resolve those issues if the funding that is being provided to A&E is going to be money well spent. We have a shortage of treatment rooms, so that all persons coming in cannot be treated in as quick as a space of time as we would like. And part of the funding will also go to bring in more treatment rooms into operation. And then, of course, there's a serious need for improving customer relations within customer service within the accident and emergency, within the hospital in general. So why is this expansion necessary? And to the tune of $11 million? Well, it's a simple thing, Mr. Speaker. Inefficient or inadequate services at accident and emergency will have a negative impact on both out-of-hospital and in-hospital health care. This is a negative impact that we cannot ignore. So what is it that the expansion project is going to do for accident and emergency and for Barbadians? It will provide additional treatment rooms. It will facilitate a plumbing upgrade, since the plumbing system within the hospital has been there from inception, and there are serious issues resulting from that. We will see a purchase and refurbishment of critical equipment, including additional sets of surgical instruments so that more people can operate. We'll see an expanded waiting room or lounge. And the drawback here, unfortunately, is that this particular project is going to take between 6 to 8 months to come to fruition. But we cannot wait 6 to 8 months, and that is why measure number 3 is important, which is the extension of the opening hours for 2 polyclinics, the 2 that I mentioned, to 24-hour service. That is going to be critical. That is achievable before the expansion or the extension of A&E is achievable. And that is what we are going to be pursuing concurrently with what is going to be happening at accident and emergency. And this is an important and transformational happening within the health sector in Barbados, the extended hours for these 2 polyclinics. Not only because of the fact that we are extending the hours, but the services that will be provided by these 2 polyclinics. As you are aware, the polyclinic system is at the forefront of the delivery of primary health care in this country, with 9 polyclinics strategically located throughout the country, providing much-needed patient care to our citizens. Last month alone, 22,000 visits were recorded at our polyclinics, 22,000 in 1 month. Now, this is the situation that we have at the polyclinics. It's not a question of opening the polyclinics for 24 hours. That will not solve the problems being experienced at the A&E. What we are going to be doing is providing those 2 polyclinics with diagnostic and dispensing services that will allow them to provide services that are only provided now at the QEH. None of the other polyclinics are able to do so. By doing that, it means that about 25 to 35% of the people who present themselves to the accident and emergency service, not for urgent care, but for these 2 services, those persons will now be able to go to to the 2 polyclinics, thus taking the load off of accident and emergency. So it'll be pharmaceutical services and radiological services, for example. And I'm advised now that with telemedicine, the telemedicine facility that the hospital has, it means that, and that will be also employed at those 2 polyclinics, it means that the doctors at those 2 polyclinics can now get second opinions direct from the radiologists at QEH, the on-call radiologists, to provide better care. And that will also result in the fact that several patients will no longer have to even be going from the polyclinic to the accident and emergency because of that second opinion and the advice and direction that can be given by the radiologists at QEH to the doctors at the polyclinic. But we're not going to proceed with this unless everything is satisfied, all the requirements for additional staffing, doctors, nurses, even examination rooms within the polyclinics, safety and security requirements have to be satisfied first before we embark on this, and we're going to move swiftly to have those in place as well. And so, what we expect at the end of this exercise, roughly $60 million being spent to do what we want to do, and the money has to be money well spent. So therefore, we should expect to see greater numbers going to these 2 polyclinics. We should expect to see overcrowding, which creates environmental issues at A&E because of the small space. Those things should be things of the past. We should expect to see a shorter waiting time for surgeries within the QEH, and a shorter waiting time by all persons utilizing the services at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And in order to do that, and in order to satisfy Barbadians that the money is being well spent, we must create some performance measures within the hospital that we, with timelines, establish so that we know how we are doing, and so that I can come to this honorable chamber on a regular basis and report progress. And that is why you have a military man as Minister of Health and Wellness. There have to be organization, there must be structure, and I'm not here to manage anything. That is the purview of the technical specialists within the ministry who are very, very competent. My job as minister is to provide leadership, and a leadership that inspires confidence that every single person working within our health system would come to work every day, not only for pay, but because they want to come to work, because they understand that the provision of service of the highest order to our countrymen must be of paramount importance. That is what it is. And this service, we're not providing it to people from Mars or outer space. It's my brother and yours, our uncles and cousins and nephews, people we go to church with, go to school with, people we line with, people in our communities, our people, human beings, humanity. And it would be man's inhumanity to man if we allow what is happening within our health sector to continue. This Barbados Labour Party government, of which I am a very proud member of, we pledge and we promise the people of Barbados that we will stop such things from happening. Mr. Speaker, I am convinced and satisfied with this start given by the Honourable Prime Minister and Minister of Finance that we are more than ready and able to deliver on what we have promised. I am obliged.
The honourable member for Christchurch South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm obliged to you. My present purpose, Your Honor, is to support the budgetary proposals, and just to comment that I believe the media is reporting that this event is styled in the name of a mini budget. That is a name that I prefer to reject. This budget has come at a time of such crisis, and it is so necessary, Mr. Speaker, that its purpose cannot be characterized in the name or the style of mini. This is a budget that attempts to confront major issues of social and economic dislocation in this country. And in that event, Your Honor, I am pleased to support the budget in its entirety. And you will hear me very shortly focus on a particular aspect of that presentation, which itself brings great personal joy to my heart. My other immediate purpose is to express deepest gratitude for that collective of humanity that sent me here, Christchurch South. I do not have a bosom wide enough to hold the gratitude that I feel towards those souls. People who knew me only by reputation, and in few cases knew me personally, but who have embraced me and have asked me to come to this place and to be their representative. And from the depths of my heart, I express gratitude to the citizens of Christchurch South. Representation is at once an honor and a duty. And I must confess to you that I am grappling with which of those virtues to reside with. But I am honored, and I must meet my duty to represent their interests, so that most of my presentation this morning, Your Honor, shall concern itself with the interests of the people of Christchurch South. I know that this is an occasion on which we tend to reflect on matters national, but I beg your permission to allow me to locate much of my presentation on matters that are local to the constituency of Christchurch South. When one speaks on behalf of a person, that act involves speaking for. But there's something called empathy, and it requires that one speaks in unison. I have located myself today, Your Honor, in a position in which I can speak in unison with the people of Christchurch South. This budget has attempted to address questions that relate to the crisis within this economy. We all know that this economy is based largely, though not exclusively, on tourism. My constituency of Christchurch South is one that is very critical in terms of tourism. It is coastal, for example. And we know that the highest activity as it relates to tourism is in the coastal areas of Barbados. That is to say, from Spikestown in the north to perhaps Enterprise in the south, and even beyond. And I come to you today, Mr. Speaker, to remind you that the constituents of Christchurch South are deeply concerned in the matter of tourism, since our constituency contains several of the hotels that dot this island. It contains several of the restaurants that dot this island. It contains much of the activity allied to tourism, and indeed the fortunes of the people of Christchurch South are related to the success of tourism. I speak not only of hotel owners, some of whom live in Christchurch South. I speak not only of restaurateurs, some of whom live in Christchurch South, but I speak also of taxi drivers whose daily fortunes depend on the success of tourism. I speak of maids in the hotels. Indeed, I speak of all the employees in the hotels. I speak of all those persons, that collective, that depend on tourism and whose livelihoods derive from tourism. And it is therefore important that this budget has attempted to relate much of its fiscal and financial policy to the success of tourism in this country and the success of tourism to this country. It is therefore important that employment by which my constituents benefit is preserved. It is also important that the sector itself, the preservation of the sector, is safeguarded by fiscal and financial policy. And if there must be an increase in taxation to preserve an industry which protects my constituency, I cannot criticize it. If there's policy that is intended to stimulate the economy, the general economy. And if there's policy intended to stimulate the tourism plant in this country, I must praise it. Since an exercise such as this, a budgetary exercise, is intended largely, according to my perspective, to do two things: to collect taxes, to service the citizens of a country, and to stimulate the economy so that growth occurs within that economy. And when, of course, growth occurs, people find jobs. When growth occurs, businesses are started, and already existing businesses find expansion. And so the residents and the citizens of Christchurch South will applaud this budget for its attempt to stimulate the economy, for its attempt to give larger prospect to their hope that they should live in a country that is prosperous. And that is what this budget has done. There's nothing minor about it. This has been a major exercise, confronting a major problem of stagnation within the economy of this country. Raising of taxes involves no mischief. And I say that for all governments. It involves no mischief. It is a strategy pursued in order to service the citizens. Delivery of health, and I heard the Honourable Member for the City, delivery of health care, the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East will tell you that she cannot properly conduct her ministry unless there is revenue available to service the thousands of school children who are under her care from day to day. So there's never any mischief in taxation. What may be the problem is when there's incompetence in terms of the way in which you manage your country fiscally. Again, I say, Mr. Speaker, that 2 days ago represented a new paradigm, a new direction in the management of this country's financial and fiscal affairs. I promised you earlier that I would have addressed a question which touches me closely and in a very warm manner. The Honourable Prime Minister went the length and breadth of this country for the last few months and made what she said was a solemn promise. She was laughed at in some quarters. She was doubted in some quarters. It was said that when the time came, that she would not be able to deliver on that promise. You and I feel strongly about this, Your Honor, that in September or late August, the doors of the University of the West Indies will reopen to all young people in this country. And that is a matter of greatest moment. It is a matter of great moment for me, sir, but I am not here to pursue personal interests. It is a matter of great moment for the young people of this country who deserve protection and who are entitled to that protection. And I've said elsewhere, and I'll say here today, sir, that when this country was described as poor, the young people were allowed liberal access to the University of the West Indies. We have become a $2 billion economy, and no one has explained to this country why in a $2+ billion economy we can no longer afford to send our young people onto the CAFL campus to improve their individual lives and to improve the life of this country. No one has explained that. What we have had from the doubters, what we have had from the cynics, is this argument about costs. I challenge anyone to quantify the rights, the interests, and the entitlements and the prospects of young people in terms of a cost. The right to an education is not to be quantified in dollar terms. We must not speak of the cost of education. what we must find ourselves speaking about is the higher cost of not educating the young people in this country. This is no minor exercise. This is no mini budget. This is major. And if I had passed across this budget, this statement, and had left anything untouched, Mr. Speaker, I would not leave untouched the issue of education and the right of liberal access to education by the young citizens of this country, whom we have an obligation to protect and defend. And I'm not only speaking of the University of the West Indies. Because when the slide begins, when the assault on young ambition begins, who is to say where it will end? When would they have come for the BCC and the Polytechnic? And when would they have gone into the secondary schools? And when would they have advanced the argument about high costs? Again, I say, Your Honor, there's no high costs. The cost is higher in not doing what this country and this parliament and this government is morally obligated to do to protect our young people. I have previously asked a question, and I'll ask it in here again today, sir. I have had a difficult time understanding why, for many years, and more so in recent times, why have we defended the sacredness of free education? You and I know the answer. But why have we defended the sacredness of free education only from the age of 4 or 5? Why has no one presented to this country a proposal that from the date of a child's birth, that mother who may be pumping gas at one of the gas stations, that mother who may be working in a hotel for extended hours and coming home at 11 at night, why must she pay for the care of her child in a day nursery? I believe that liberal access to education should begin at the birth of that child. What has happened, Your Honor, is that old trends have survived against what is now the reality. And by that I mean to say that in previous years, most mothers were not working, and therefore the care of a child was guaranteed. She was at home. Most mothers are now working. And most mothers are now working in difficult conditions, in conditions in which they must leave home, and getting a child to the nursery is as important as getting to the workplace on time. And I see them. Sometimes one is on the right arm and one is walking at the left. And I see them in the ZR vehicles. And at the point at which we tend to feel that the ZRs are acting recklessly, sometimes might we not stop and accommodate them because there's a lady in that van with a child on her lap. There's a lady on that van trying to get home before 6 o'clock to provide for her children in conditions of severest adversity. The point I make, Your Honor, is that young mothers in this country are struggling more than most people in this country. And that struggle intensifies and deepens at the point at which they become mothers. And therefore, mine is a plea to my colleague, my good colleague, who has the honor to represent St. Michael's Southeast, to consider, over the course of time, assistance for those young mothers who must take their children to daycare every day. In many cases, without the help of a father. In many cases, without the help of a grandmother or a grandfather. And some consideration must be given to these young souls who did not invite themselves into this world, but who we brought here. And I want to suggest and to propose to this new government, this good new government, that in the future, those young mothers should be protected against the adversity that attends their daily life. While on education, Mr. Speaker, I should say something about its relationship to violence. I feel an obligation to do this. I have the pleasure of representing a constituency which is not afflicted as much, thank you so much, which is not afflicted as much by crime and violence as are others. But I always say to my friend, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West Central, that constituency boundaries are really artificial. And that the problem of violence in an adjoining constituency is equally a problem in my constituency. Although it may find itself located more centrally in that other adjoining constituency, it is that threat of violence across the street sometimes that makes a boundary artificial. And therefore, this country must always be concerned. And any policy of government, and particularly government social policy, must relate itself to preventing or tackling crime in this country. I relate it to the last government's failure, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the last government. Let us move forward. The people have spoken, we have a mandate, and the people expect us to exercise ourselves progressively in that mandate. But when the last government slammed the door shut on young people in this country, the last government ought to have considered that that may have had an impact on the emergence of violence in this country. If one young man who would have been destined to occupy the rooms of the University of the West Indies, if only one young man who was the son of a maid and therefore found himself unable to do so, if only he was in that position, then that is a large social problem. One is too many, Your Honor. One, as my friend from St. James Central, the Honourable Member for St. James Central, one is too many. Your Honor, you more than most will understand this present situation, that the most violent and heinous crime in this country is now committed by persons between the ages of 18 and 21. The age at which most young people in this country matriculate into the University of the West Indies. That is the tragic relationship between deprived education and the option to engage in crime. As the Honourable Member for St. James Central says, one is one too many, but I suspect that the numbers are larger. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that you and I take no personal, not even professional pleasure in the fact that every week and every day and every month of the year, we find ourselves interfacing with babies, 16 and 17 and 18, young men who ought to have been pushing the doors of the University of the West Indies are having the doors of dogs open for them. This is no mini budget. This is a major exercise in rescuing this society. And I applaud the Prime Minister for coming to this country when other Prime Ministers would have been in celebratory mode or mood and immediately tackling the problems, the social problems that confront us, the economic problems that confront us. I congratulate her for this stroke of administrative efficiency in coming to this country early to deal with the problems that confront this society. As I said, Mr. Speaker, education has been important to this country's development, and it will continue to be important.
Time I remember. You still have good time remaining, I remember.
I still have time.
Good time too.
You see, a few weeks ago, you and I suffered at the hands of a musician. When we were in full stride, you and I would hear some music. But the musicality of your dulcet tones is enough for me. I am glad for your dulcet tones. I am not as concerned that education serves an individual function. That is to say that a young man or a young woman on receiving his bachelor's or her bachelor's becomes a candidate for social mobility. Let us be less concerned about that. And let us be more concerned that education serves a social good, that an entire country becomes elevated, and that if one man or one young woman is educated, the society becomes elevated. Let us therefore focus on education as a social good. And let us end on that aspect of the presentation by saying that never again in this country, I do not hope to live in this country and find that we say to our young people that as an economic strategy that they must be deprived of something for which their parents fought hard for. On that I end by saying the cost of education may well be high. The cost of not educating is astronomically high, and we cannot afford the latter. I come to the other vulnerable group in this country. As a parliament, as a government, we must always seek to defend the most vulnerable groups. And the two most vulnerable groups in this country are the old and the very young. I trust we've demonstrated the need to protect our young. Let us demonstrate that it is our duty to protect those persons who built this country. And these are not merely emotive statements. These are statements of fact. We are here because someone else worked harder than us, in more adverse circumstances than we find ourselves in. There's a sense in which we have sailed through life. Many of us in this country have sailed through life with relative ease. Many of us. Have we ever paused, Mr. Speaker, to consider the condition of a man 80 years old when he was your age or mine, or the honourable member, the young honourable member for St. Michael Southeast? 40, 50, 60 years ago, life in this country was not an easy life. They may have complained, and they may have complained quietly. But what they were doing, they were building a country. And they were building a platform. Even this parliament, that most of us in here could not enter. They were preparing this country, this platform, this parliament, for occupation, democratic occupation by the citizens of this country. They have struggled hard. They have built this country. And so I say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to the government, that they are entitled to lives of safety, free from violence, and to lives in which there is a guarantee
of health care. And I turn and I applaud the member, the honourable member from the city. It pleases me so greatly to hear him give the further guarantee to this House that polyclinics will now be open for 24 hours. And two of them, and it is, of course, my greatest personal pleasure that among them is Randall Phillips Polyclinic. And I had something of a query from a constituent just last night. He says, well, if there, he says, he called his name, but I cannot do that according to your orders and rules. But he said, thank him for this initiative.
I remember has 5 minutes remaining. 5 minutes, sir.
5 minutes. Thank you, sir. He wants to thank him for that and to indicate to the honourable member for the city that he also wants the lighting improved, because if you're going to be opening it in the night, there's no guarantee that the sun will exist on our shores at that point in time. So he wants him to do some lighting. I've heard your music, and I will therefore wrap up by indicating to this chamber in terms anticipated by the honourable member for St. Peter. He anticipates yesterday that I should visit this House with something on local assemblies. And I will do so. I shall not disappoint him. But I want to say to you, Mr. Speaker, and to this country, that a part of this new administration's efforts must be that of deepening democracy in this country. That no longer must a man living in a constituency find himself at the mercy of a parliamentarian if he wants a street light at his corner, if he wants an improvement to the bus service, if he wants the road repaired. I visit you, Mr. Speaker, with the proposal that local government, if you wish, we are styling it in terms of people's assemblies, that there must be an establishment of people's assemblies across this country. I say to you, I submit to you, Mr. Speaker, Christchurch South is ready for it. And those who applaud are doing so because their constituencies are ready for it. Their constituencies are ready for an administration in which people are quite ready, willing, and able to participate in making the decisions that immediately touch their lives on a daily basis. The time has come for local administration of local affairs in this country. And there will be a way to do that. The Honourable Prime Minister has promised to make public consultation, to go into public consultation with the citizens in this country. But I say this, that local government in this country must never reflect the sham of local government that we've had in this country for the last 10 years. Something called, and I hate even to call the name, constituency council. There was nothing democratic about it. So let me not condemn them. The people have already done that. Let us praise the proposals that the people will make. That the people's assemblies in this country intended to solve the problems at local level must come from among the people. No minister should choose, no minister of government should choose a local assembly. And I go as far as to say this, that in its purest form, a people's assembly must have no partisan characteristic. That persons who sit on those assemblies should not come as a B, a D, or an X for that matter. That they come as citizens rendering the pureness of their heart to service of their fellow man. And that is what this great Labour Party is promising to the people of this country.
Please wind up, Honourable Member. Please wind up, Honourable Member.
Yes, and that is my winding up. that I trust that in the next few months, this government, through the Honourable Minister, the Honourable Member, under the stewardship of the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, under her ministry, will institute a body that will consult with the citizens and seek to promote local government in the form of people's assemblies in this country. I am obliged to you, sir.
Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And let me at the outset also congratulate you on your appointment to the very high office within this August Chamber and Parliament of Barbados. And let me also thank Almighty God for all his blessings and for leading and taking charge of my life and affairs, and also for his continued blessings upon this nation, Barbados. I would also want at this time as well to thank the people of St. Michael West Central, who in their large numbers went to the polls and elected me as their duly elected representative to serve in this Parliament of Barbados. I am humble, as I said on the early hours of the morning following the election, to have been chosen by the people of St. Michael West Central to serve in this Parliament. And I also want to give them my assurance that I shall always be at their service, and that as I have come in here today to represent their interests, and also to represent their interests in the name of the Great Barbados Labour Party, that I shall remain faithful and I shall never betray their trust, representation that they have put in me for giving me this honor. I will remain in the constituency. I will do my part, and I will do everything possible, as I have done for the last almost 9 years, and before that, when I had the opportunity to manage political campaigns in the constituency. I should remain there for them and be very accessible. And I will also want to thank members of my campaign team who have had the good fortune and the good honor of helping me in the campaign, which, as you know, is very grueling at times and can become very challenging. And I wish to put into Hansard my thanks, sincere thanks to all those members of the campaign team who would have contributed to me being present in this Parliament today. And I thank the constituents and I thank the campaign team. Mr. Speaker, the general election is behind us. And even though, and the process of governing has commenced, but when you think about all that we are faced with in this country, it is as a direct result of what obtained the last 10 years. We've had a situation where the leader of the opposition at the time, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, warned this country leading up to a general election campaign that we no longer had the luxury of time. There were some who felt that in her quest to tell the country about what is before it, felt that it was a naked grab for power, that she was power hungry, that she couldn't wait. All those remarks were made when the leader of the party and our members and some of those who were serving in here in the last Parliament made representation. On Monday, we got a glimpse. We got a sense of an appreciation for the mess that the Democratic Labour Party left this country. And you know, it is amazing because going back to 2008, and I recall in a budget presentation in this Parliament, by that government at the time, trying to give the impression that Barbados was left in a mess. But it is stupendous, because I don't understand how back then, when a country was left with low unemployment, I believe it was about 6%, over $2 billion in reserves in the banking sector, I don't understand how you could characterize that as a mess. But today, the people of Barbados understand that the Democratic Labour Party took them for a ride for the last 10 years, that the Democratic Labour Party took them on a course of action that have almost caused the Barbados dollar to break. And I say to you that when the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael Northeast, revealed the facts to this chamber, a lot of people, yes, were stunned. But those of us who were in the vanguard for democracy, and those of us who were in the vanguard to protect Barbados from economic disaster, we weren't surprised, because we knew the sense of urgency, Mr. Speaker, that awaited Barbados. And the fact that an incoming government could have chosen to remain on the status quo. An incoming government could have decided, look, we came in on a wave of popularity, but we can perhaps, give it some time before we address the issues. I say to this Parliament and to this country today that the leader of this party took the appropriate course of action, supported by members of the cabinet, of course, because it has to be approved by cabinet, the measures, supported by her cabinet, took the appropriate course of action. I refer to it as a corrective course of action to ensure that this country, this Barbados that we love, remain on a safe course, and that we come back, ladies and gentlemen, so that, honourable members, so that we are in a position where we can go to work now and start the corrective action that is required of the Barbados economy. And I compliment the honourable member for St. Michael Northeast for her approach. I believe is within about 18 days of a new government, in fact on the 18th day of a new government, that she could have put together, along with members of her economic and finance team, that she could have put together a set of measures and proposals designed to get Barbados back on track. And I have to congratulate them. This Barbados economy that we inherited was almost a collapsed economy, ladies and gentlemen. There was no parliamentary oversight over spending. There was a run on government expenditure for 3 months leading up to the election campaign. There was no parliamentary oversight. The executive ran the country without that parliamentary oversight, and they did whatever they liked. The objective, clearly, in my view, was to ensure that they manage and that they spend the money without parliamentary oversight as an executive, because it was their view that they wanted to ensure that they defeated Barbados Labour Party candidates. Well, history was created. History made. 30-0, ladies and gentlemen. And it is because of that level of arrogance and the belief that you can use money, even within the executive, to deprive people from coming into Parliament. I say to all those who felt that that was their motive, I say to you, look at us today. The people spoke, and because of their word, we are assembled here. And we've gone to work hard on their behalf. You have a situation, the bunching of the debt. You had a situation where, obviously, for anybody who understands the most basic approaches to public sector debt management or even to private sector management, will understand that this country could not continue on the course. And it is absolutely necessary, and the government is on the correct path, that you've got to restructure the debt. It is absolutely necessary. There is a link between debt and foreign exchange. And if you do not manage it, you run the risk that you will run out of foreign exchange. And when you run out of foreign exchange, the price of foreign exchange will change. In other words, you'll be subjected to almost a devaluation. So that the measures are designed to ensure that we do not run out of foreign exchange. And the measures are also designed to stabilize the Barbados economy, to put it back on a growth path. And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, it has fallen to the Barbados Labour Party on this occasion. It fell to the Barbados Labour Party on previous occasions. But that the task before this Barbados Labour Party government, I think, and I rate, it is a mammoth task. I believe it will record it in history that the job before members of this government to correct the wrongs of the last 10 years would perhaps go down as history as the biggest task to be accomplished by any government within 5 years. And I say to you, we have the knowledge, and I wish to assure the country that we have the skills, and I wish to assure the country that I know that there perhaps on occasion there will be those who will want to be the naysayers and try to confuse you. But I say to you, put them behind you, because for the last 10 years, they led you in a path, a destructive path, a path that was destined to see the further collapse of the Barbados economy. So I say to the country, it is our mandate to manage this country. We will make you proud again. We will do what we have to do in this parliament in your name to ensure we make Barbados a better place. Throughout the election campaign, we mailed boards, and every night, most nights, when I walked and I went to the platform, I made the point that Barbados, when you look around this country, was overtaxed. And when you look around this country and you realize that a government increased by over $6 billion the debt in this country, and you looked around, you say, what is it? What is it that they have done with the taxpayer dollar? What is it that they have done with the money that they have borrowed in the name of the taxpayers of this country? And when you look around, you can't see no new infrastructural requirements, no new assets to leverage additional foreign currency or foreign earnings to this country. When you look around Barbados, what is it? You can't see the state of the roads. And I say to you that the high levels of taxation choke the Barbados economy. And even though this government took the bold step to repeal and to announce the repeal of the NSRL, it is but a first step to ensure that we remove the choke, that we start to see growth and get this country back onto a growth path. And I say to you that the Democratic Labour Party level in indirect taxation, they still have the 17.5% VAT. They had the 10% NSRL. You had the 2% Forex, 29.5% alone in taxes. I say to the people of Barbados that the Barbados Labour Party, through the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, came in here, delivered a budget true to her word, and remove the 10% NSRL. If you were paying 29.5% before the Barbados Labour Party came to office, and we told you we were going to do it, and we've done it, ladies and gentlemen. And today, versus 29.5%, you're paying 19.5%. The 17.5% in VAT and the 2% Forex. And when we look at the additional measures, we've removed 10% NSRL. The levy, the contribution to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and honestly and frankly, I do not believe there's anyone who would criticize a government for helping to increase revenue in order to give the Queen Elizabeth Hospital funding to ensure that the place that at any point in time, God forbid, any one of us would have to visit for corrective surgery or corrective procedures, that no one would deny or no one would argue that. So even if you add back the 1% through the national insurance contribution, you're still down 9%. And that is the point I wish to make. And if you add the garbage collection, $150 a day, but has only $546 a year. And I'm not saying that because I want to prove the point about taxation. The point is that we remove this government, this Barbados Labour Party government, remove 10% NSRL. And all that we've had is a contribution that we're asking for garbage collection. The fuel tax, 28 cents on every liter. But when you take the net gain, it is only $20 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but this is a $1 billion economy now. And those are things that we've done. So we have removed the NSRL, and I wish to make this point too. In removing the NSRL, you have a situation, I'll probably use just 2 examples. You have a situation that motor vehicles that were obviously sold for, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000, use it as an average. As a result of the reduction in NSRL, those vehicles now will cost you about a car will cost you approximately $3,000 to $5,000 less than what you had to pay before. That is a saving, a significant gain. And to the construction sector, there are a lot of projects in the pipeline. I am aware of some. And there are people who, because they had to finance construction projects, felt that they could no longer be carrying additional 10%. It probably sounds like a small number, 10%. But if you are going to build, for example, a $10 million project, or you're going to finance, I should say, a $10 million project, that's another $1 million in financing that you have to look for. So that when you remove an SRL, we have now excited the construction industry, and those who had plans to go and make substantial investment in the Barbados economy, who would have otherwise had to look, if you use the example of 10 million additional $1 million in financing, they can get on with their business now and run with their projects. And that is what this Barbados Labour Party government is about. It is about accelerating growth, it is about accelerating investment, and it's about putting people back to work. Because I have many constituents in St. Michael West Central who would like some jobs too, and who suffered at the hands of the DLP government. And they too deserve an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to get a job in this country. And I am confident that the removal of the NSRL will create jobs and it will get activity going in Barbados again. When we talk about university education, let's look at it. And I agree with the Honourable Member for Christchurch South, who spoke and he was very passionate about it. How could a government deprive young men and women from going to the University of the West Indies? And not only that, you had a situation in Barbados, and I've been faced with this in my constituency, where several young persons, and several not so young persons too, had to postpone, defer, even cancel their attendance at the University of the West Indies because their parents can afford it, and they certainly can afford it. And I say to you that it was a promise made during election campaign, and like others who've spoken before me, I'm happy to be associated with the fact that the Minister of Finance came in here and made good on the promise to ensure that those who can't afford university education, those who work in the hotel sector, in the construction sector, who can't afford to pay, they too can go to University of the West Indies come August or September. And you know, there are some outside of this parliament who would wish to belittle that policy initiative. But I say to the people of Barbados, and for those who found themselves in a position where they couldn't pay, and for those who had to struggle to pay to make ends meet in order to get to the university and who are still there now, I say to you that this policy, the policy of paying tuition fees for the students, for residents of Barbados, will save a family, and I'm just going to use a basic, if you're in social sciences, etc., will save a family at least $800 a month or $9,600 a year. Now, contrast that to if you ask for the country to pay a contribution in some other way. But can you imagine a family who has perhaps parents with maybe 1 or 2 children, for example, and they're both qualified to go to university, but unable to do so? The policy initiative of the Barbados Labour Party will allow those young people and not so young to go to the University of the West Indies, and that is at $9,600 that they no longer have to pay, Mr. Speaker. And the initiative as well coming out of the budget in respect of the $5,000 loan for small entrepreneurs. I salute that. $10 million placed at the disposal of entrepreneurs in this country. When I at $5,000 a pop. Now, when I calculated it, that's equivalent to 2,000 loans. 2,000 persons in Barbados, small businessmen and women, who didn't have access to financing, thanks to Barbados Labour Party government, will now have access to financing without having to go through the rigors of research and everything else. I say to you that I applaud that, because there are a lot of people in my constituency who will benefit from that too. We can't share equally around the constituencies, but some quick math would suggest that if you have 30 constituencies, at least you get 66 persons per constituency qualifying. So, so that I salute. It is innovative. It is fresh. It is a good idea to help small business people to just get there. And I'm confident that this policy will invariably lift up a lot of people and give people that long-awaited opportunity to take off. Mr. Speaker, the wage increase, well, it is only about fair and reasonable. For too long, you've kept workers going in this country in the public sector without a wage increase, almost 10 years. It will, yes, cost us $60 million, but you know what? It is $60 million that we didn't have in the Barbados economy. And I'm sure that the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs would appreciate the fact that you will have now $60 million being circulated in the Barbados economy. And because VAT is a consumption tax, you call it ad valorem, etc., that will also yield some revenue. So I understand it, but it was absolutely necessary because it is going to contribute to increase economic activity in Barbados. And that is why you need, on occasion, to give wage increases, because it helps to stimulate the economy.
Honourable Member has 5 minutes remaining.
The increase in non-contributory pension, well, what can I say? Again, a promise made, a promise kept. The people in St. Michael West Central are absolutely delighted that come July 1, they will benefit and they will receiving checks, an increased check every 2 weeks. And I want to applaud. And I want to say this, because there were a lot of people who got confused and felt that it would destroy the National Insurance Fund. But let me make the point. National Insurance is only the agency responsible for facilitating the payment. Non-contributory pensions is essentially paid for by the Treasury, the Consolidated Fund of Barbados. So it will not break the National Insurance Fund. And I want to say to the people, and I will speak to that at a later stage, but I have 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker, so I have a race for time.
You have 4.
That the electrical upgrades, I want to say to the people in Denton Row, Housing Area, Antrim Coast, Kildare Close, and all of them in Watton elsewhere, that the fact that you have a government that came in here and made provision in a budget for electrical upgrades, I say to you, if you had to pay for that, that would cost you almost $2,000. So that's $2,000 that you don't have to look for. So like university education, you have another 96, and then you got a further savings of approximately $2,000. That is what this Barbados Labour Party government is all about. Now, Mr. Speaker, I would have loved to touch on the Transport Board. It is the correct policy measure. We have a situation, sir, where we have 100 buses that are over 23 years old. We have 110 buses over 18 years old. We have 30 buses over 15 years old, and another 70 buses over 12 years old. So the average fleet of the Transport Board is approximately 17 years. I support the measure. It is absolutely necessary for the viability and the efficiency of this country to ensure that people get to work and get to work on time, and that the money allocated for new buses will go a long way to enhance productivity in this country. Because if a Democratic Labour Party government could accumulate a deficit of over $700 million at Transport Board, and if they could have paid at least $10 million a year for the last 10 years, over $100 million to maintain buses, it is the correct financial decision in the best interest of the country to start the process of fleet replacement, and the $20 million allocated will go a long way. Mr. Speaker, in respect to the $10 million for the purchase of equipment and roadworks, well, I'm delighted. And I know that the Honourable Member for Christchurch West will also ensure that we in St. Michael will also have a share of some of those roads. We spoke about the extended facility for the polyclinic. And again, you know what is the benefit? Say a family, to parents who perhaps have their children and who can't afford to go to a doctor, can now go to the Randall Phillips Polyclinic or the Sir Winston Scott Polyclinic, Mr. Speaker, and they too don't have to pay a cent. They too can get medical consultation at no cost, and I applaud that measure, Mr. Speaker. I also wish, Mr. Speaker, to say something a little bit about tourism. I know that tourism has to be profitable. I expect it has to be profitable, Mr. Speaker. But I also know that when I
have 1 minute remaining, Honourable Member. 1 minute remaining.
All right, Mr. Speaker, I will come back to that on another occasion. But, Mr. Speaker, in closing, though, I'd like to make this one point at your mercy, sir. I believe that because of what we have gone through over the last 10 years, I would wish and I would recommend to the government to have an investment conference. Do it in Bridgetown, Barbados, or if you take it to the capital city of London. This country has a lot to offer. We need to go back to the capital markets or bring them here to send a very clear message. Look, this country is open for business. Bring local investors to the table. There's a lot that we can do. Bring the equity partners. Go abroad or bring them to Barbados. Let them see what we have to offer. Because we need investment in the country. And once we get investment in the country, we will sustain Barbados. And Mr. Speaker, in closing, I want to say that I will be disciplined.
Please wind up, Honourable Member, please.
Thank you, sir. I will remain very disciplined. And I remain faithful to the cause of this country and faithful to the cause of the Barbados Labour Party. And I say to you that I am comforted in the words by the book of Joshua, chapter 1, verse 9. Be strong and have a good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee wheresoever thou goest. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
The honourable member for St. George South.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to add my voice to this debate on the budgetary proposals and financial statement for 2018 that were delivered by the Honourable Prime Minister on Monday. But let me begin, Mr. Speaker, by thanking the good people of St. George South for the overwhelming support that they have given to me in the last election and indeed over the last 5 years. And Mr. Speaker, it is indeed a humbling experience. And Mr. Speaker, it is even an equally humbling experience to be asked by the Prime Minister, the member for St. Michael Northeast, to lead the charge in this critical ministry to grow, transform, and indeed for future development of this country at such a critical juncture in the history of this nation. Small business, entrepreneurship, and commerce, Mr. Speaker, touches the lives of everyone in this country. And I look forward to bringing my commitment to excellence, my experience in the private sector, and my passion for my community and indeed Barbados to this task. My Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, has not only charged me with the responsibility for growth in this sector, but she has also given me that responsibility in this ministry to ensure that people are not taken advantage of by unscrupulous business practices and inefficient regulators. And I intend, Mr. Speaker, at every juncture to do good by the people of this country, to do good by the people of St. George South, and to keep the Barbados Labour Party's flag flying as we seek to rebuild this country. So I stand here, Mr. Speaker, at the start of my second term in office, recommitting to my constituency, my colleagues, and indeed this country, that I will bring to you a work ethic that is beyond none, an intellect and a heart for this job to ensure that my ministry will not go through what it went through under the former minister over the last 10 years. And I say to my colleague, as an aside and as a joke to you, Mr. Speaker.
No, you can't use an aside and a joke at this time, honourable member. I think you know better also.
And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, to my colleague, the member for St. George North, I get to work at 7:30 every morning. And this morning was no different. I reached to the office at 7:30, and I had a cup of coffee, Mr. Speaker, while I begin to delve into the intricacies of the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Commerce. But let me congratulate the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, because for me, what is fundamental over the last 20 days, or close to 20 days, is something called truth and honesty, whereby the Prime Minister came to this country and she gave the country a complete analysis as to what this country is being faced with. And that there will be no gravy train over the next 5 years that people can just jump on and say, here we are. Like the former administration would have wanted us to believe that the governance and the government were indeed on some frolic and on some gravy train as it relates to running this country. And the honourable member, the Prime Minister for St. Michael, the honourable member for St. Michael Northeast, sorry, Prime Minister of this country. And I agree with the member for Christchurch South We started this journey long before the campaign started in January or in December. We rubbed shoulders with our people. And in the last election, I heard some members who sat on this side during the campaign making some serious statements about management, about how they were too busy working to communicate with the people of this country. And I say to my colleagues, as we seek to rebuild this country and our various ministries, one of the key tenets of good leadership is communication. And I pride and I'm impressed with the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast and how she has communicated with the people of this country and indeed with the social partnership of this country to bring them up to date with the happenings of this country. And I heard this morning, I heard the President of the National Union of Public Workers, and I followed Labour closely, member for St. Peter. I was the Shadow Minister of Labour and National Insurance, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central. And the last administration treated Labour with scant respect and disregard. And I heard the member, the President of the National Union of Public Workers, he said that he has had more communication with the present Prime Minister within the last 2 weeks than he has had with the former Prime Minister over the last 5 years. And that's indeed a shame. And the people of this country, I say to the members on this side, I sat where the member for St. Michael Northwest is sitting. I sat there and I said to them, time is longer than twine. And the people of this country will treat with you for disrespecting them and treating them with disdain and no respect for the working class or the middle class people in this country. And so said, so done. So it is no surprise to me, Mr. Speaker, and I play road tennis, the member for the city and I, that we have 30 love. And they were indeed so. But I wish to move on, Mr. Speaker, because I don't want to dwell too much on the past. But I heard over the last 24 hours, I heard the Honourable Member for the former member for St. Philip West, and he used the words, but I can't see how these measures can impact our fiscal position. And I can't see. And he keeps saying he can't see, but I know he couldn't see. I know he couldn't see because the blinkers were on for the past 10 years. And that is the same member who came to this Honourable House and proposed debt reprofiling, but yet he can't see. He's not truthful to himself nor to the people of St. Philip West. And I thank my school and present member for St. Philip West for treating him the way he did. He stuck to the people and he stuck to his stars. And indeed, I am happy to see you in here as my senior at that great institution in St. John. It's indeed a pleasure. And I heard the Honourable Member, the former member for St. James South, as well, trying to equate or trying to find a figure for Ambassador Dame Billy, Ambassador Clyde Maskell, and Avinash Prasad. And it was 1 o'clock that I listened to it this morning. And I got up from my table and I laid in my sofa. And I said to myself, this honourable member, and I want this chair because I am told that I'm sitting.
Honourable member, you mean former? The former honourable
member, Mr. Speaker, for St. James South. Sorry, the present member for St. James South. I heard that I'm sitting in the seat that the former member for St. James South sat in, and the former minister for indeed small business, entrepreneurship, and commerce. And through you, Mr. Speaker, I would like this chair sanitized. I would like it sanitized, Mr. Speaker, not because the person is dirty, health-wise, but because of the implementation deficit that he suffered with. The lack of implementation, the implementation deficit, and it is seen in the ministry. And I will speak to that, and I want to compliment the members in the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship, and Commerce for over the last 2 weeks for giving me the briefs and bringing me up to speed with the happenings of that ministry. and how indeed that ministry can transform and grow this economy. And these public servants are indeed technical, they're indeed intelligent. But like the member for the city said, when you lack leadership, and leadership matters most, then you get that inertia that these members displayed and this country suffered from over the last 10 years. And they're asking, trying to compare the cost of some brilliant minds that the Prime Minister have chosen to help this team, this bright team. And I must pause at this stage and compliment all the new members who have entered this Lord Chamber, the speeches that I've heard since Monday. I am indeed impressed. Mr. Speaker, I didn't feel to speak. But the members of St. George South kept calling saying, we need to hear you. We need to hear your voice. And indeed, I'm here to represent the people from St. George South and indeed the country. But I was so impressed because every single member touched on every aspect of these budgetary proposals and indeed more. The blue economy, the member for St. Michael's South, the member for St. Peter, I just call a few, because they are all excellent presentations. And I will see myself as a senior member in the chamber now. I was indeed impressed. Now, the cost of corruption. I get upset when I hear the former member for St. James South speaks, because that is all talk and no action. And it is displayed in the ministry as well. And I hear him trying to equate, or trying to determine where the Prime Minister will get the money from for these bright minds that she has asked to assist this brilliant team. And I would say to the former member for St. James South, tell me the cost of corruption under the last administration.
Millions of dollars.
And I'm sure when we work it out, the Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central and the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South Central, along with the Prime Minister and the brilliant economic team, Ambassador Maskell and the others, when they work it out. And we put a cost to the cost of corruption under the last administration. That cost is indeed more than the cost of the remuneration or the salaries for every single 30 member of the Barbados Labour Party team that won the last election. And you are talking about opportunity. And that is where some of the opportunity comes from. We'll recoup the cost because we have, the people of this country, they have gotten rid of this last administration. So the cost of corruption as of the 24th of May becomes zero, because this is an ethical group that has been chosen by the Prime Minister to lead the charge in this country. So that is one of the opportunities that I have highlighted that we as a party and the people of this country will benefit from. And I hope, I heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael West, the opposition leader, in his right, who asked the question, if these men's hands will be held to the fire. And indeed, the verdict is out. And like the Prime Minister said, give me the vote and you will see. And we have the confidence in this team that we'll get to the root of the corruption in this country that was prevalent over the last 10 years and not 5 years. Because we had corruption before under the late, and I don't want to call dead people name in here. So, Mr. Speaker, there's a price of corruption. Now, the growth sectors are critical to transforming this economy. And I wish to spend 2 minutes on the renewable energy sector. And I know, with all due respect to the Minister of Energy, I know he wouldn't mind me speaking for 2 minutes on it. Because it is one of the areas, and I heard the member for St. Michael West challenging and probing and asking, where are the measures in energy and the only. We can't write everything in this document, member for St. Michael West. We can still sit with you as you see it fit. We can sit with you and we can go through with you some of the measures. And I will highlight a few here. one or two for you. And I'm not the Minister for Energy. The Prime Minister said in the budget that one of the key growth areas would be the renewable energy sector. And part of my ministry's responsibility is to ensure through the Fair Trading Commission that there is a tariff rate, framework, and structure for renewable energy generating technology in this country. I repeat that. Part of the responsibility of the Fair Trading Commission that falls under the ministry, my responsibility, is to ensure that there's a tariff rate instituted for renewable energy technology in this country, whether it is solar, it is biomass, it is wind. And we waited 10 years for legislation, 10 years for legislation under the Democratic Labour Party. I've been preaching from that corner by the member for St. Michael Northwest. In a speech, the longest time I spoke in this chamber, it was 1 hour and a half on renewable energy and the impact it will have, the positive impact it will have on this country. And today, only roughly around less than 10% of electricity generated is from renewable energy in this country. After 10 years of the Minister of Energy sitting in that ministry and twiddling his thumbs and doing nothing to push growth in this key sector. So once we, as a government, and I will address that, I have already met with the Fair Trading Commission. Our second meeting is on Friday, 2 o'clock, and we will bring to Cabinet a paper outlining how we will set the tariff rate for renewable energy in this country so we can move forward, so that the players, those independent players who want to invest in the technology, and they're not going to invest in the technology unless there is a tariff rate, so they can see what are the benefits to them. And that's a fact. So the last administration sat down and did nothing. So here we are. I'm charged with that responsibility, and I assure the people of this country that will be done within the next 2 weeks, and a paper, a comprehensive document will go to Cabinet outlining the way forward with respect to the tariff rates to ensure that the independent power producers can invest in renewable energy technology. And further to that, still on energy, member for St. Michael West, this government sat on a license agreement for the utility, which is Barbados Light and Power, whose license will expire around 2028. And as a result, Barbados Light and Power is hesitant in investing in its grid technology. So in order to accommodate these independent players, you have to upgrade your grid. And this government sat on that for 10 years as well, and the former government sat on that and did nothing. I would like the member for St. Michael Northeast to sanitize her chair as well, because this implementation deficit can be contagious, I heard. So we all probably need to sanitize our chairs, not the guys on the other side. You're seated in reputable chairs. The Honourable member for St. James Central sat right where the member for St. Michael South is sitting. So you are indeed in good hands. So, Mr. Speaker, those are some of the, or at least two of the measures in renewable energy that this government will indeed institute within the next couple of weeks in conjunction with the Minister of Energy to ensure that this sector begins to grow and that people can make a living out of this sector. Now, Mr. Speaker, the whole aspect of small business development, entrepreneurship, and commerce is indeed critical, like I said earlier, to this country's growth. And many capitalist economies rely on the trickle-down effect for economic growth, whereby you get that trickle-down effect from those that have down to those that don't have. But this government, we will institute measures through my ministry whereby we will stimulate growth in this economy from bottom up. And I heard a few members in the chamber, they spoke to this whole aspect of the trust loans. And I'm charged with that responsibility. And I say to you, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West, we will look after you. Because the people of St. Michael West voted for the Barbados Labour Party with you being the candidate. It was the confidence in the Barbados Labour Party through you, of course. And we will look after you. We don't see you as an enemy. So brace yourself. Come sit with us, and some of this trust loan funding can go to the members of St. Michael West. And indeed, the Barbados Labour Party will indeed be enriched with the investment in St. Michael West. But I wish to speak to the loan briefly, because we are all excited, and it is indeed a growth opportunity that we need to fast track. And these loans of $5,000 going to small businesses and entrepreneurs, unsecured loans, it is very critical for growth in this country. And once you pay your monies, you pay your debt, this loan can go as high as $10,000 for you. But you have to have a good credit rating once you enter this meeting turn. And indeed, the member for St. Michael Northeast spoke about this trust loan being administered like a meeting turn. And indeed, we will throw the first meeting turn for you. And after that, you have to be up to date with your payments and indeed your credit terms. So, Mr. Speaker, we will go through this country from pillar to post, from nail technicians and hairdressers to well diggers, from painters to graphic artists, from tattoo artists to mechanics. We'll go to caterers, shopkeepers, farmers. And that is how we will be instituting these trust loans, unsecured loans. And Mr. Speaker, the vision that I have for this trust loan, rolling out of this trust loan, Mr. Speaker, is on an e-commerce platform. Because what I recognize and what we recognize, that there are some small businesses and entrepreneurs who, as a result of the lack of the digital technology, they have failed to reach the international market. And there's no limit to small business and entrepreneurs in this country. We believe that the time is right whereby we can reach the international market. No longer shall we be confined to these 166 square mile shores. So through e-commerce, we will be launching the trust loan so that people can have the opportunity to be seen internationally and take advantage of all the opportunities that are offered on the international scene. Now, Mr. Speaker, having said that, we must recognize, and studies have been done in this whole micro and small and medium enterprise to show that more than 2/3 of the global private sector workforce are employed by micro, small, and medium enterprises. And it is very critical that we, as a government, focus on this, because some studies within CARICOM also show that for more than, in some CARICOM member states, GDP accounts for 70%. 70% of GDP comes from these micro, small, and medium enterprises. And it creates some 45% of jobs in CARICOM member states. So this ministry is indeed critical for the growth, for domestic growth in this country. And these are empirical evidence that have been provided here to show that indeed we can benefit and we can transform this country and we can further develop this country through micro, small, and medium enterprises.
The honourable member has 5 minutes remaining.
Now, Mr. Speaker, there's also some hindrances that I wish to mention. One obstacle, and that is in the area of vending. And this government has a unique opportunity to create a new vision for vending in a modern Barbados. I recall the days when I saw a lady by the name of Miss Devonish driving through Ellerton when I was a little boy, and she traveled to Oistins to ply her trade Ralph. Miss Devonish, she was a hawker then, and she sold bananas, edos, cassavas, whatever grew in her backyard. And I recall the days of Miss Cora Jordan as well, from Ellerton, going to Swan Street also, with her yam and edos and sweet potatoes. And indeed, my point to be made here is that countless families have lifted themselves out of poverty through playing a trade and selling vegetables and fruits, and indeed ground provisions as vendors in this country. And it pains me to see that the former administration want to criminalize vending in this country. It pains me to see that. So we as a government, we must create an environment where illegal vending can be dealt with in a way as to continue to motivate and encourage vending. Because we would like to see coconut vendors someday moving from the informal economy to the formal economy, where they have their open spaces, whether it's car, it is stalls on the highway, some places created for them. So when they move from the informal economy to the formal economy, you know what that speaks to? A level of sustainability whereby they will begin to pay NIS. And they can utilize the coconut husk in some vertically integrated sector, whether it is energy. So these are some of the issues that we'll be tackling in the ministry to ensure that vending becomes decriminalized and that we introduce only civil penalties for individuals who vend without licenses or operate outside designated zones or other infringements. We cannot criminalize vending at this stage when we want to develop this country, a new vision for vending in Barbados, vending in a modern Barbados. So we'll be working with the Attorney General, the Honourable Member for St. Joseph, in ensuring that we, in the Ministry of Small Business, Entrepreneurship and Commerce, we come up with a comprehensive vending policy for Barbados that will treat to all components of vending, casual and career vending. And I'm saying to you, Mr. Speaker, the work has already started. We have met with Barven on Thursday last, and we're indeed on our way with the policies. So I say to you, Mr. Speaker, getting to work at 7:30 has indeed bear fruit thus far. And we're able to come up with a number of papers that will reach Cabinet in a very short time. And I want to thank the members of the public servants, in this key ministry for being so diligent and following the leadership that has been provided thus far within the last 2 weeks to ensure that these documents were indeed produced. And indeed, there is a lot more work that has been done in this ministry. And I have a document here, Mr. Speaker. I can make it a document of the House. Competitive action teams, which speak to the ease of doing business. And it has focused on a number of areas, Mr. Speaker. Just some of them I will just highlight to you, because
the honourable member has 1 more minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A lot of work has been done in this ministry. This is a document on May done by the Research and Planning Unit, and it speaks to the ease of doing business. I have shared it with the Prime Minister. I've shared it with the Minister of Labour thus far, and I've shared it with the Minister of Tourism. And this indeed speaks to slower passenger facilitation at Grantley Adams International Airport, speaks to slower processing of applications by tongue and country planning. And I heard the Prime Minister give the commitment to this country that that is her next task to address, so that investment can come to this country and tongue and country planning don't hold up any investment. It speaks to the slower processing of transaction by the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, slower drafting of legislation. These are the things, Mr. Speaker, that impacts, in addition to some stuff on customs. And one of the fundamental issues also cited in this document, the inability of the country to export food and agricultural products
The honourable member wind
to
up,
the
please.
European and the European Union. And I say to you, Mr. Speaker, we have hit the ground running. All members in my ministry are on board. And I want to say to you, with the visionary leadership and the astute leadership displayed by the Honourable Member for St. Michael North East, and indeed this team, we will indeed reduce our fiscal deficit as outlined in this document. And we will indeed continue to protect our vulnerable people. And this country, within the next 5 years, we will return those glory days whereby we are seen as punching above our weight. And with those words, Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
The honourable member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I would like to use this opportunity to thank the great Lord above for allowing me this opportunity to be here. I also would like to thank my family, immediate and extended, for the support that they showed me over the last year and a half. Another thank you to my campaign team who supported me for the last year and a half despite many criticisms. Most of them were new to it, like myself, but we endured. We proved that there was no need to get down and dirty like the others, and through it all I managed to maintain my integrity. So, Honourable Member for St. Philip, for St. George South, as a doctor I would like to tell you, corruption is not catching, no need to sanitize the seats. And last but by no means least, I would like to thank the constituents of St. Philip North for their unwavering support, their faith in me, and their trust in me to adequately represent them, Mr. Speaker. And I choose this occasion and many, many more to do so adequately. After the election, I, like the Honourable Member for St. George North, was inundated with calls from constituents, from family, not only of congratulations, but on being the first female representative for St. Philip North. But to some extent, many of them expressed disappointment at my going down in history for being the first elected member, duly elected member of Parliament who does not hold a ministry in almost 3 decades. I want to say to my people, stand firm. I am not insulted by it. I have faith and trust in my Prime Minister that she knows what she is doing. Oftentimes, we do not know the reason for things, but they always are revealed, much like the present leader of the opposition. I'm sure he has his reasons. I want to say that I have joined many members who have started here and have had a future doing well to represent their constituencies and to represent in Parliament, and I intend to do so as well. Being chair committees, it allows me the time to spend in my constituency that I am grateful for, and I will continue to do, which I have been doing for the last 46 years, for the last 20, providing for my people. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend my government. That sounds wonderful, my government. on several of the initiatives taken to improve the lives of our citizens as outlined by the budget read by the Prime Minister 2 days ago. Since the elections, Mr. Speaker, and I dare say from the day after the elections, there was an almost palpable weight lifted from the shoulders of the citizens of Barbados. And though it exceeds logic, somehow there was a renewal of hope among the citizens when the Barbados Labour Party administration took over. I have to give praise, Mr. Speaker, where praise is due for the initiatives in the recent mini-budget, and I apologize for the member of Christchurch South for calling it a mini-budget, but I agree with you in one way, and another way I agree it's a mini because I know there's much, much, much more to come that the Barbados Labour Party administration has to offer. One of the things that hit me well, and many of my constituents, I'm sure, is the removal of the NSRL. This will make the trips to the supermarket much less painful, and I heard that now I might be able to purchase a car. I might be able to purchase a car, the one I have outside falling down all under me, so that will certainly help me. But I am sure my constituents are grateful for that measure, sure. And this is one example of many that this administration is known for in terms of the promise of manifesto promises to see them fulfilled. And I commend them on that. One or two of my pet areas, the health, the other being education. The health especially is near and dear to my heart. And the thing is with health, at some point, each one of us will visit the QEH as a patient, whether it's when you come into this earth, whether it's when you leave this earth, or whether if you spend a short layover, we all end up at the QEH, regardless of race, creed, regardless of financial standing. And I think kudos are due to the Prime Minister and her team for seeing, ensuring that the QEH is looked after. At a 1% tax on insurable earnings, that equates to a maximum of $46.50 per month. And I dare say this is but a minuscule amount compared to the monies, the costs of maintaining one's health, whether it be by medication, whether it be by procedure. $46.50 is a ridiculously small amount, and it goes a long way. I am grateful also for the expansion of the Accident and Emergency Department of the QEH, both infrastructurally and with equipment, and this is welcomed by, I am sure, staff and patients alike. And it would be remiss of me if I do not mention here that there are many charities in the private sector that would love to contribute to the health system, especially the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I must commend Broadway to Barbados as one of these large charities. But I have to say, and I know for a fact, and that Broadway to Barbados, they have been coming here for several years, and they're really thinking of pulling out because of the measures of the last administration. This is an organization that has provided over, I dare say, millions of dollars to the QEH over the last few years, but they have reached a roadblock from the last administration where they're being asked to pay VAT, not only on tickets sold, but are also asked to pay VAT on complimentary tickets. And I, for one, have benefited from a couple of these complimentary tickets because it's not cheap. But it is beyond me why an organization that has been so charitable would be asked to pay VAT on their tickets. These are people, I will give you a few of the costs for some of the things they have donated to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. 11 multifunction beds, that equates to $232,358. Over $200,000 in central monitoring systems. Standalone monitors at $119, almost $120,000, and the list goes on. This is a charity, Mr. Speaker, that not only provides equipment to the hospital, they see to it that they maintain the equipment as well as educate staff on how to use the equipment. They had been given a promise by the last administration that the VAT would be waived, verbal promise, and we all know, with respect to the last administration, that in that case, a promise is a comfort to a fool. And if it's nothing else, I would like to see Broadway to Barbados encouraged by way of waiver of taxes to continue their work here. It makes you wonder how a multi-million-dollar corporation like Sandals could be given such tax waivers, and a charitable institution like Broadway to Barbados is being unfaired, basically. And this needs to be addressed with a matter of urgency, I beg. The polyclinics, I offer praise as well to the government for seeing that 2 of the polyclinics will be opened for 24-hour periods. I think this is a great initiative. This will service not only my constituency, but several others. And it is my hope that in the future, near or otherwise, that maybe the Morris Bio Polyclinic will be included to service the people in the north. I think that is important. I like the fact that they will be outfitted with diagnostic equipment. That would go a long way in terms of treating patients. It might be a good idea as well to put emergency equipment out there with the attendant doctors to avoid the trips to the hospital, the referrals altogether. But that is, I am assuming, will come in the near future or not so far future. Unfortunately, the Democratic Labour Party has lost or had lost a golden opportunity to make the St. John Polyclinic a hub for healthcare on the countryside. But rest assured for the Honourable Member for St. John, that all in good time. All in good time. Mr. Speaker, I want to commend the government on the waiving of penalties and interest on taxes owed from 2016 and prior. The fact that the interest is also calculated on a simple basis rather than a compound is exemplary. That is much appreciated, but I'm sure the constituency and the players that fall into this category. What I would also like to see happen is the penalties and interest also waived if there is nil tax payable. Let me explain, and this is near to me because it affects a member in my family, a retired member in my family. Let me explain. Under the old waiver, if you had, for instance, $1 to pay in taxes, you paid your $1 and your penalties were waived. The interest accrued would have been waived. If you owed $0 and were late in filing, the $500 were still charged. And this affects many people, especially the retired ones, many of whom were unaware that they had to file taxes. And this covers my own father, 88-year-old gentleman. You almost wonder if you should wait for him to expire and let the state take over, because the interest accrued would have been a lot of money. I want that looked at so that the retired persons who have already contributed do not have this problem in the future. I also want to comment on the fuel tax. I like the initiative. It benefits everybody who commutes. Collection is guaranteed. It eases up the police force in trying to track down the defaulters so that they could spend their energies doing something else. And what is probably my favorite, those who use the road more often pay more, which is very reasonable. It also inspires purchase electrical vehicles, which leaves less of a carbon print on the country, which is commendable because that is the way we are going in our future now. The 5% increase in salaries across the board for the public sector, no one can argue that that is not of some help. Many members of the society will benefit from this. Many members of the society will now have the extra funding they need. Example, come September, to provide for the children to enter school, where that was missing for almost a decade. and I appreciate that on behalf of my constituents. Old age pensions increased. I am unsure why that was an issue with the last administration. I think it is something that the Prime Minister and her team should be commended on. These are people who have worked tirelessly to get Barbados, to get me, to get every member in here where they are today, whether it be grandparents, great-grandparents, they have contributed greatly to our society. And this is but a small token of our appreciation, but a small token. I want to comment on the tuition fees that the government has now agreed to reinstate their payment of the tuition fees. I met a lot of young people on the campaign trail that either wanted to go to UE or were forced to drop out of UE because of the fee structure there. And I am happy that this has restarted. I think education is a right and not a privilege, and this should continue. This is our legacy and this is our culture, and it needs to continue. I want to add here, though, that I think it should be considered some programs at the Barbados Community College. Example, nursing. There's a degree in nursing at the Barbados Community College, which should be noted is not offered at the University of the West Indies, and I would appreciate if consideration be given to the students of this program to also pay their tuition fees. A parent called me yesterday, a little worried. Their fee over 4 years, it might sound a little to some, but it's a lot, was $11,800 for the 4 year, which means she has to look for roughly $1,500 per semester to get her daughter through nursing. And I had met nursing students that dropped out. And I would appreciate the consideration of the government to provide funding for the tuition for the degree programs, or that degree program offered at the Barbados Community College where it's not offered at the University of the West Indies. I commend the government on the hiring of safety officers and social workers and guidance counselors into the schools. I think parents will now breathe a little sigh of relief knowing that at least their children are safer in going to school, and that they will get to see them return home in one piece. And I appreciate this. It might be of benefit. I know there are psychologists provided to these schools, but there are few. And it may be of benefit to increase the numbers of psychologists to service the schools in Barbados. We have many psychology students coming out of UE, that many of them are jobless, and I think this is an area that we can utilize creating jobs, and we can utilize them, make the degree worth what it is. I applaud the Master Teachers program, where teachers that are good, that we want to stay in teaching, are rewarded financially for their efforts. I want to add here that sometime in the future, and this is my opinion and my opinion only for now, where a new teacher coming into the service with a degree unrelated to teaching is paid more than a teacher that is Erdeston trained for the job, and I think that needs to be looked at. Yesterday, I heard the Honourable Member for St. James South lauding the Prime Minister and her team for providing funding for the housing units that she has issues with in her constituency. I praise this effort, but it will be neglectful of me as the duly elected representative for St. Philip North if I do not put in a plug for at least 2 of the schools in St. Philip North. These would be St. Catherine's Primary, who had an issue recently with rodent infestation in the classrooms, and of course my alma mater, St. Mark's Primary, which I will continue to fight for both of them. I heard yesterday, and I spoke on it today, the member for St. Michael Southeast mentioning that schools were closed because of a lack of a water tank. I want it to be said here that thank God that St. Mark's School is now a little closer to St. John, where the water goes off every week. They do not have a water tank as it stands, but as I say, we can do some work for ourselves. Provide me with a plumber, I will provide you with a water tank for this school. The school, St. Mark's, the school really is in need of a new building. But at the very least, we need to get repairs on the way. It was started after some noise was made sometime back, but we need to get repairs on the way. And I don't know if there's money, but we need to find it so that this long holiday, summer holiday, something can be done for these students. I am tired of, as I walk in every morning into the school, some child with the face, including mine, with permanent scars from falling from an uneven yard. And I want to see that that is fixed, and I will do all in my power to run down the Minister of Education in a nice way to see that we get somewhere with this issue. It is near and dear to me, and I'm going to see it through as I have promised. And I'm not a person to go back on my promises. I will be wrapping up. I wouldn't keep you too long. I will be saying what I need to say and sit down. But although I do not lead a ministry of my own, I consider myself to be a part of them all. I'm a general practitioner by profession. That means I dabble in every area, and I offer myself to each of you to contribute to their ministries. I have a lot to offer, and I would like to be a part of it. This will not be a case, as George Orwell put it, that all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. And I know my colleagues know this, and will attest to it. And I am putting myself out there. I am willing to work with my constituency. Not only willing, I will do it. We have some issues now, even today, that I need to attend to at some point. It will more than likely be tomorrow. But things like that can be done. There are a few, not many, points of clarification that I would be grateful if the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast in her wrap-up will include. I asked some questions about them and I understand it, but there are members of my constituency who have been asking for clarification, and it would be remiss of me not to put it out here. A couple of the points are VAT charged on online purchases. Some of them want to know if the VAT already charged at ports of entry will be added onto that, or it will just be one charge. That is a query that we're getting. The other is if VAT will be charged on online purchase of educational courses. And I think that is important. If we are for education, we need to clarify that part for many of them who have already signed up or who are planning to sign up. The other thing is on the garbage collection, and I think the initiative where we contribute on our water bills towards sanitation and the sewage service is fantastic. I think we all need to play a part in this. That's the only way we're going to get out of this hole. I suspect it won't last forever in terms of the charges. But one of the constituents I have and friends have been wondering and querying, and I would like it clarified as well, if those who pay for private garbage collection, what will happen to their water bills? I know they have to pay a part of it, yes, but will they have to pay the full sum, or will there be a rebate offered? These are just for clarification that I'm requesting. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, let me say here and now that I support the government on its many initiatives. I believe that although some of the measures were not so good going down, there were enough measures here to offer a little honey to make the swallowing of the bad medicine a little bit more palatable. I know that the Barbadian public understands the road to recovery is not an easy one. And I encourage the people of St. Philip North and wider Barbados to stay the course for a little while. Stay the course because a brighter horizon is on its way and it is coming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm much obliged.
The Honourable Member for St. Michaelis.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am going to add my short contribution to the discourse in this honorable chamber today. But before I go that far, I'm humbled by the fact that I'm a child of Him Most High, and I have to give thanks, gratitude to the Master. I am also conscious that I am what I am because of those who preceded me and the bloodline to which I belong. And therefore, I also offer thanks to my ancestors. And I always believe that they are always present and that I have a responsibility, unswerving commitment, not to trample on the ancestral graves, because I view that as sacred. And I believe that with those guidelines, it helps me to get to the destination that my life and my life existence is supposed to take me to in terms of my contribution to the development of my civilization in my time. I also want to say thanks to my grandfather. I wish I was privileged enough, like other people on this earth, to be able to speak with some knowledge of my great-great-grandfather. But my limited history goes back to my grandfather and the sacrifice that he has made in order to make me and my family at least relatively comfortable in the struggle over the years. He has given his life to the battle of the black man traveling through migration to Panama Canal. And it's as a consequence of that travel to Panama Canal that my family was able to own the first piece of mud and rock in the Western world. First time we ever owned anything that has some value for a long time. I also want to thank my mother, out of obscurity, still very much alive. She can't speak of Lodge School. She can't speak of Harrison College. She had a primary school education, and the only job outside of the house, she had a job outside of being a shop attendant, is working at home, taking on domestic responsibilities. And if there is one unfortunate situation at this point in my life, is that my mother is still alive, 95 going to 96 years on the face of this earth, and you're seeing the diminishing of her consciousness at this specific time. I wish she was here to see. Sir, I know I asked you a privilege to call my mother name. I wish she was here to see Ruby Montel Prescott Black Boy in these chambers. I wish she was here to see it, and I will never hold back those reservations. There's nobody on earth could ever think about changing it, because I am proud of who I am, and I will walk, talk, and say what I have to say about my people without any reservations or any charges or counter charges that is racism, because I know what I'm talking about. And it's important to me, sir, because I view these debates and even the aesthetics of these chambers probably in a completely different way. Sir, as I observe you, I see things that other people don't see. The traditional symbolism of the wig. What do you see? I see the traditional symbolism. I don't see the traditional symbolism of the wig. And it makes me feel that you, as well as all of us, ought to first start off by understanding who we are. And I always say, I am what I am, not just because of the ancestral lineage, but because of who you are as well. And it helps me to form the kind of construct that is so necessary to be able to appreciate what it is that we are doing. And I think that that drive to develop a democracy, that drive to social justice, that drive for us to see equity and equality among man underpins the interests and that unswerving commitment to those who I just made mention of, those known and those unknown, the ancestral. And we should never, ever betray that trust. As long as we understand that is what we're doing, we are on the right track. And I believe that is that thinking, staying on that trajectory, that is responsible for the distinguished representative of St. Michael's Northeast, the Honourable Prime Minister, staying on track, connected at all stages on ensuring that whatever structures we put in place for the economic management of this country, that the vulnerable in this society must always be a part of black self-government in our battle as we move into the future. And that is what is important. And I watched that trend. This budget for me is a progressive instrument. The framers, along with the Honourable Prime Minister who have contributed to this, must also be respected for the hard work and creating a niche, an innovative niche, that can take us out of this cesspool. Because lest we forget, there are so many people sometimes within 48 hours of victory, some even within 24 of victory, seem to believe that overnight by some divine act that there's a new dispensation in place, and all of a sudden a radical change is going to occur within 24 hours, and then a new world emerges, a world without a political or economic history, or even a history of corruption. And there are so many people who seem to believe that as soon as this great Prime Minister, the first black female Prime Minister of this land, takes up the range of power, that she is the daughter of Houdini. Somebody believes that she is a new goddess on the horizon, that she can work miracles. Everybody overnight blank their memories, all the corruption that precede the existence, not even understanding what a mandate. The mandate is almost beyond the imagination of man. All the statisticians, all the political scientists, all the sociologists could not predict today that there will be a parliament in Barbados in which there was a purge, a clean sweep across the nation. We have to give credit to the people of Barbados, who even when we set about on that political journey, none of us could have predicted that they would have given us a resounding victory of the magnitude that we had on the 24th of May. And where we are, we're not even at the 24th of June. Where we are. So Barbadians must reflect. I don't buy that nonsense about processing short memories. You have to look inside, because the truth is inside. But if you talk without thinking, isn't that you don't know? Because you're not only talking on theory or knowledge, you're talking on experience. And you know what you suffered. And as a result of what you suffered, you sat silently. And I remember going through that election, being one of the main targets, one of the strategic points in my constituency, where the Dems gathered and eat and drink and planned for my destruction. And the member of St. Michael's East was supposed to be no more. The member of the city was supposed to be no more. The member of Southeast, we were the three main targets. As they set about not to protect themselves, ignorant of their fragility. They concentrated on us. And through that battle, I was relatively positive. And I believe my colleagues were, because we went into it with that kind of attitude. But how it is today, that people cannot understand that we are where we are because of what they did to this country, what they did to the people of Barbados. And we cannot tell you today, with all the economists that we have, every time we unearth some piece of mud, greater and greater debt in the domestic economy and the domestic accounts of this country. We cannot tell you how much it is, because every day small documents coming out of our offices, contracts, even for institutions that never existed and will never exist. I have in my possession a document here for $700,000 for Cahill as only a part payment of legal fees. Legal fees of $5.8 million for a lawyer. Just received a QC. The project does not exist and will never exist. $5.8 million.
Honourable member, will you make that a document of the House, please?
Of course, Mr. Speaker. I'm trying to show you. I'm trying to show you the level of nastiness. There is no adjective, adverb, nothing that can describe this act, this injurious act, bordering on some form of criminal activity. $700,000 received. And one of the provisions in the contract itself is saying that the government will pay and Cahill will repay the government. Do you understand these terms? I am not a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. I'm a layman. I understand this, sir. This document is available to the Honourable House. I would be grateful if you would oblige me with a copy of it, because it is unbelievable, and I believe it is a document that all of us need to have an opportunity to examine. No, I don't. From time to time, I am going to share this not just with the chamber, but with the public of Barbados. With the public of Barbados. You know, I've been hearing people talking about the imposition on taxes at the level of the waterworks. I've been hearing people saying these are draconian measures, that we didn't expect this, you didn't expect this because you don't know where you are. If you knew And we are now trying to find out, we are the investigators here, we are now trying to find out where you are. And I don't want to inflate in any way the levels of consumption, but I have many more of a similar nature in my possessions. I will show you them from time to time. I'm saying this to you because the team from the Ministry of Finance has to address these issues. And they want to address these issues while focusing on how can we continue the development program over a number of years. How can we contribute to the development of our education? How can we stop the slide so that we can sustain the quality of life that we have been enjoying probably prior to the last 10 years, or restore us to that level? You have to do the work of a magician. So I don't understand people who cannot appreciate it, because if we don't do this now, the crisis will deepen. The crisis will deepen. I heard the Honourable Representative for St. Philip West indicated this morning, you have to have money. You have to have money to run the welfare department. The experience is there. And if there's a thread in the efforts of the government's policies and program to protect the vulnerable at all times, because we are human beings, we have to have money for social services. And if a Prime Minister and the collective body of thinkers and planners in this institution bring this kind of budget to you with the level of urgency that you have witnessed, you should be able to extrapolate from that if you have confidence in who you elected. And I would like to believe the vast majority of Barbadians elected not just 30, in a country that has 30 candidates from the two major parties and a few fringe groups who lay claims to be in political parties. Probably some social hot groups. The people said unequivocally, the Barbados Labour Party is best suited to take this country forward. They said that. They give a traditional party who boasts of its interests in democratic socialism for all these years and bringing these people into independence in the 1960s. We beat them in every box with the exception of two. What scientist, what magician could have predicted that a party that now unearthing itself, resurrecting itself, and speaks of a rich history, when it came before the judge and the jury, mirrored in the masses themselves, they absolutely rejected them. Absolutely rejected them. Sir, I don't know if I should see, but this morning, unfortunately, I stumbled on a media paper that I just saw the faces, because these people, they have no locus standi in this exercise. Done. They have no locus standi. The people spoke on the 24th. There's nothing that they can say. You have to have legitimacy and a sound moral footing to make pronouncements on these important public issues. Otherwise, they should not even be entertained. Not within the first 3 weeks after an election when the people rejected them. Shouldn't. We are embarking on the restoration of the social democratic program. And that is why I said, and I started off by talking about the ancestors, a program that was given to us to improve the Barbadian civilization. A program that also should influence all of us to get back on track with the whole concept of Caribbean integration. And apart from what is in this document, I would like to know that we can capture this within the framework for the future that I will hear again, because I have not heard a word since 2008, during the last Barbados Labour Party administration led by Owen Seymour Arthur. I hope that the former Prime Minister speaking anything positive about the importance of Caribbean integration. I've even heard the criticism of the CCJ. I've even witnessed the democratic process being threatened when 3 courts, Caribbean courts, said the same thing in relation to the Commonwealth citizens in Barbados. The High Court of Barbados, the Appeal Court of Barbados, and CCJ. And I saw the resistance. I saw the arrogance. I saw the democratic process being ignored and abandoned. No respect for the rule of law.
No respect for the Constitution. No respect for the People's Representation Act. A Prime Minister deciding that he will take charge, abuse power for 5 years and 3 months, and looking for every gray area scripted in a document. No application of conscience, common sense, or intellect. Just simply saying, I am in power. I will extend it for 3 more months. Had internal rumbles, external turmoil as a consequence of the abuse of power. I know you have a Prime Minister and a team that says to you, we are going to put a structure in place to rescue this country. And while we're doing that, we are going to also continue on the development process. So the Prime Minister said, I have given my commitment through this entire election to ensuring that one of the most fundamental planks in public administration and development must be reapplied in the form of tertiary education of people who had no education before. What existed before 1833 was tantamount to just reacting to the circumstances of labor. And you started off with 3 hours in 1834, still at 3 hours. You saw secondary education. And you saw the higher form of education, tertiary education. And a government who are the beneficiaries of that educational program that allow the most vulnerable and their offsprings to get an opportunity to go to a university, the only university that we have in this country. Those people cut off the ankles, legs, and knees, everything of the ordinary boys and girls who born with the intellectual capacity, with the ingenuity to make vertical mobility. Just provide the opportunity for them and they will get there. And the former Prime Minister, a whole cabinet of beneficiaries of that opportunity that was offered to them, turn a blind eye on that reality. Yeah. If that
provision was not put in place in the 1960s. The Prime Minister then and the ministers then would have been struggling on the streets because they'd be working without a vendor's license on the streets. But they end up being in this so-called August chambers, being prime ministers and ministers in this society. I know one of my colleagues indicated it's not, I'm even talking about this, a selfish philosophy that sees the vertical mobility of an individual. But we don't subscribe to that alone, because when we come to these chambers as a representative of the people, we move away from that selfishness in the philosophy that guides us. And we sacrifice self for community and nation. That's what our life is about when we come here. Anybody else who come here and don't have that philosophy undergirding the way in which they function is a traitor to the ancestors and to the cause. That is the reality. That is the reality. That is the reality.
The honourable member has 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, look. The trajectory must remain, the trajectory must remain constant. Anytime the trajectory shifts, trust me, the leader of the opposition has a friend, because I remain firm to that. And I give my voice, I give my energy, I give my time, and the limited intellect which God has endowed me with in making contributions, because I know what it is to have to journey into a pit toilet at midnight. I know what it is to be there with roaches being my company. I know what it is to be there using brown hard paper and advocate newspaper. I know what it is, and I know what it is to be seeing a mammal or with some small red eyes. While I ought to be there in peace and comfort, I am threatened by a very militant-looking species. I know what it is to experience that. I know what it is to experience that. I know what it is, sir, to bring friends to your home, and you have to talk to them through the window. And you just hope that one of them will say, I would like to liberate. Because if they got to do it in the street, they have to do it in the street. I have watched this political party from its inception in 1938 always remain constant. Concerns of pensioners, concerns of the unemployed, making sure we work and respect the relationship that we so assiduously developed with the trade union movement, especially the initial or the pioneering group called the Barbados Workers Union. I am feeling a sense of fresh air and a sense of rebirth when I see that fusion tackling major issues in this society. I believe that if we continue on that journey, for those who cannot see, they will see. But we must not be blind and do not understand what is happening out there, because they're always going to be distortionists. They are professional critics, pronouncing negativity at all times. And regardless of what you do, there are going to be people out there saying, this is burdensome. It is not fair. It has placed the burden almost exclusively on a special social class at the top. When I say, and it is so, I will say so. And especially if you place the burden at the bottom, I will say so loudly, for sure. Right? But I am convinced that we did the best that is humanly possible in the circumstances. And at the end of the day, corporate Barbados ordinary workers, middle-class people in this society, those who are unemployed and unemployable, with special reference to the disabled community, and in some cases, pensioners, especially non-contributory pensioners. The adjustments that we have made from what it is, $155 a week to $225 a week is a major consideration, humanitarian consideration, and it puts us back on track with the initial agenda. Sir, I am extremely grateful for the limited time that you have given to me and to allow me to...
Not me, sir. The rules speak to that.
And so let me say I'm thankful for your patience and at least allowing me to say a few words on the behalf of the good people of St. Michael's East and the people of Barbados in general. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sit-in for lunch until 2:25 p.m.
Seconded.
Question is that this Honourable House be suspended for lunch until 2:25 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber is suspended until 2:25 p.m.